Skeinz Diaries, episode 110, and we are Thursday the 9th of September. And welcome along. And just a few housekeeping things before we kick off, because we're going to jump in boots and all this morning, to let everybody know the store, even though we are at level 2.5, we are going to be reopening the store on Monday the 13th. That is just literally to give us a little bit more time to get everything ready for you for the reopening. It has been a crazy old time here with the sale, which finished at midnight last night. And in fact, I think the last order was received through at 11:58 last night. So you were certainly shopping well into the darkening hours. So thank you for that. And we've got the packing teams going for it to get that yarn out to you as soon as possible. So just a reminder, do be patient. We are experiencing much greater volumes than we expected, but we are getting there, and we will get those orders out to you as soon as we can. So thank you to everybody who have joined us. And yes, and from Monday, you'll be able to call in store, pick your collections in store, and just remember all those protocols around level 2.5. But that's enough of all of that. I've got a fantastic guest for you today. And this is someone I've been wanting to get on. So we were able to work out a time because, of course, I forgot about the long weekend in the US. And it is the wonderful Cheryl Beckerich from Wise Owl Knits. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
Hi, and it is so good to have you here. We've got everyone's jumped in this morning and a whole bunch of, so Cheryl and I are actually in another chat group and of knitters as well. So, and mostly in the US, I'm one of the outliers, been in another part of the world. So all that team are there as well, which is great to see our Telegram knitters, which is awesome. And Cheryl is a real favourite of ours here at Skeinz because we have knitted a number of your designs. So for everybody here in New Zealand who don't know who you are, Cheryl, explain who and where you are and kick things off for us in terms of what you do.
Well, great. I'm Cheryl Beckerich, and I live in Indianapolis. So that's Indiana, kind of in the middle of the USA for all of you in New Zealand. I laughed when I got your email today because you signed it Cheers. And I've got one friend that's from New Zealand, but he lives here. Well, actually, he moved to Arizona a few years ago, but he always signs his emails Cheers. So I'm like, oh, that must be a New Zealand thing.
That's a New Zealand thing.
But anyway, I have a full-time job, and I kind of design as a side gig, and I love to do it. I usually write things that I want to wear, so they may not appeal to everybody, but
yeah,
I figure you got to do what you like.
Yeah, well, so this is the thing. So this interests me. I didn't realize that you had another job. Like, this is a side job because you're prolific, Cheryl. I mean, for a lot of people, I mean, you have Wise Owl Knits, and many of our Skeinz knitters know your designs from the Cabled Swancho that you did in our Southlander yarn earlier in the year. And that has been such a massive hit, that Swancho. And I see Tabitha's already in chat, who she was, poor old Tabitha. I just, posted Tabitha's image out to everybody wearing this Swancho as one of your test knitters. And we've got our samples sitting in the shop here in our yarn. We love it. But you design for Cascade, and you have got dozens and dozens and dozens of designs with Cascade.
I do.
Tell us about that relationship, because we stock some Cascade yarns here.
Yes, I was so glad to hear that you were doing that. Yeah, I started designing for them probably about 10 years ago. And, they're in Seattle. They're half a country away from me. So it was all via email. I'd send them ideas. They'd say, yeah, no, and ended up doing a lot of work for them, but had honestly never met them. I talked to them on the phone a couple times, but most of it was just over the computer, over email. So a couple of years ago, I was on a long camping trip that went through Seattle. So I got to stop in and meet Shannon and Carl. And it was just so fun.
Yeah, so we really have enjoyed working with them because, of course, as you said, Seattle's half a country away for you. Well, they're an ocean away for us, but actually, really, it's getting anything out of the west coast of the US for us isn't as difficult. You know, we can get it on a ship relatively easily. Well, we could when the world was more normal. But it is so great to be able to, we've loved dealing with them. We've just had our sale and we've had their lace in our sale. And we just love being able to get yarns in that we just aren't yarns that we can manufacture ourselves. And they have such a great wide range of yarns that fit with the sort of designs and the things that we love. So when you design for them, what are some of the things that you really enjoy? Because I notice you do a lot, you do adult, you do children. What do you like doing? I mean,
you know, I really prefer adults over children, and that's probably because when my kids were little, I wasn't knitting much, so and they were boys, they didn't really want any sweaters. So I haven't knit as many children's things, so I don't feel quite as confident doing that as I do adult things. And you know, honestly, when I started, I would make things to fit me, and it was a bit of a learning curve to fit all different sizes.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I know that I talk about a lot is the ability to be able to make modifications to designs. And actually, it's a really interesting conundrum now. And I mean, do you find this now as a designer? Because I know for me, I would find designs and designs would go up to a certain size. And I'm, you know, we will eventually meet in real life, Cheryl. I'm not only large, I'm also very tall. So I never had an expectation that I would easily find a design that would be sized up to accommodate where I was at. So I learned very, very quickly to make modifications and gradings and sizings so I could make something work. I wasn't going to stop knitting something because it said, oh no, we're going to stop at 42 inches or whatever the number may be. So for me, I was always quite used to that. I mean, how do you find you get a lot of pressure now because now I'm seeing gradings and sizings past 62, 64 inches. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, there's only so far that slide rule can go sometimes, I think.
Right. And, you know, when people are of larger sizes, they can be large in so many different ways.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find a standard that's going to work for everybody, and really any size, smaller sizes too. People are always going to have to use a little bit of their own ingenuity and modify things to fit themselves. That's why I really loved your last podcast where you had your chart out and showing the importance of gauge, because it really does give people so much more control and so much more flexibility and a better fit.
Yeah, and Ethan Barclay Inu, Ethan is he works for Outlaw Yarn. He's immigrated to New Zealand, but he's known to the North American knitting scene as a technical editor. He's one of the busiest tech editors in the business up there. And so, of course, grading is a real hot potato for him, being a tech editor. And him and I are always talking about, in terms of modifications and making things fit. Like, it's just, for us, it's because he's a former dancer, so he's tall and lean, and as he said, designs, he often finds designs traditionally designed for women give him a better fit than designs that are done for men. So making those modifications is, engage, once you've got those really basic skills in your toolbox. And what I just explained the other day, they joke around here, because I had that conversation with people in the shop, and I write it on the back of a brown paper bag. I've got my Sharpie. I write it on the back of a brown paper shopping bag, so then they can put the yarn or pattern in it and don't lose it. And that's how I started. It's not once you actually get over that mental hurdle of doing those few basic bits of mathematics, it just blows open any pattern, anything. It really is a really clever skill, really, really good skill to have.
And that lets you substitute different yarns that might not be the same size. And there's just so many things that can help you with.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, The sweater you've got on is absolutely gorgeous, Cheryl. What's that? These guys love show and tell.
It is called the Dusty Cardigan. And I did a collection, I believe, in 2019 that was several sweaters.
Is this the craft beer collection?
The craft beer collection.
I love the craft. I love the name of it. It's fantastic. So walk us through the craft beer collection.
Well,
how did this come about? I'm going to put it up on screen while you're talking about it, Cheryl.
Well, everybody loves craft beer. Maybe not everybody, but I love craft beer. And my husband and son started brewing. And I did one sweater. Let me grab it. I did this sweater that's a man sweater called Scottish Ale. It has a zillion cables in it, and it is the warmest sweater ever. Like, it has to be really cold out to be able to wear it. But that actually was pre-craft beer collection, but it kind of led into it because I named it after a beer. And then I thought, well, I'm going to just name all these others after a beer too.
Right. I'm just going to get this in here. So sorry, I'm just getting that. So just so everybody knows, Cheryl and I kind of got together, but it took us ages to get it so we could hear each other. So that's why we are not as onto it as I would have liked. There we go. Right. Is this going to let me do this and play ball? It is. Oh, look at that. Lovely. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah. So the Dusty Cardigan, there's a beer in Northern Indiana, Zombie Dust, and it's an award-winning beer, and you could get it in Chicago, but you couldn't get it in Indianapolis. And we were all mad because it was brewed in Indiana, but Chicago's a bigger market, so that's where it all went. But this sweater is named after that, and I've got another one that's named after a lambic, and everything in the collection was named after some beer.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And I love the asymmetrical front panel. That's, just such a neat little feature off to one side with that sort of lace panel down the front. No, it's lovely. And how did you construct that? Is it all done in one piece, or?
It is not. The sleeves are separate, but they were picked up, and I did short rows around the cap to make them fit really nicely. And it's a fitted sleeve. Yeah. It's not, you could modify it and make it a little bit looser fit, but I like my shoulders kind of slope down, and if I have a nice fitted sleeve, my sweaters stay on me better.
Yeah. See, I'm really, really glad to hear you say that, because this is a conversation that I've had with Libby Johnson from Truly Myrtle, because she is a really fond proponent of that fitted sleeve, and she'll often do a short row construction at the top for exactly that reason, because that's a wide neck cardigan. I know one of the things that I've talked about with measurement, I talked about it in the video the other day, people will measure to here instead of here, which then means your shoulders, everything slips and slides around, which can drive you crazy. And having that really fitted shoulder, if you are out there honestly and you're somebody who is really self-conscious of this area through here, and you think to yourself, I can't have a fitted sleeve or a fitted shoulder, wrong. I mean, honestly, having that fitted shoulder and see, there goes the microphone, and the fitted it's perched on a piece of Lego, don't you know? I know, the stand is broken. The things we do, the glamour of internet podcasting, and that fitted sleeve is actually really flattering on any size, and it's something that's really comfortable to wear.
Yeah, and it just makes things stay where they're supposed to stay, and that looks nicer than something that's falling off your shoulder that you're tugging at all the time. So
yeah, absolutely. And how do you go? So this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about was in terms of yarn. So this is what, I mean, we stock Cascade Yarns now, well, some Cascade Yarns, which has been great. And their pattern resourcing is second to none. I think they are amazing. But here in New Zealand, obviously we manufacture our own yarns. So I spend half my life doing sort of yarn substitution. How do you find, I mean, what yarns do you like to work with? You've now played around with a little bit of ours, but what do you like in terms of, what's your go-to? Is it a sort of a superwash? Is it something a little bit more toothy? What do you enjoy?
I prefer things that are a little more toothy. I love the colors on superwash, and they're fine for shawls, but I don't often use them on sweaters. I just don't enjoy that as much.
Yeah.
And really, I'm worsted weight or DK most of the time, and sometimes a little bit bigger. I haven't done a fingering weight sweater, and I've got lots of fingering weight yarn, so I probably should get on that sometime soon. But that's a lot of knitting.
Yeah. Mind you, that sweater that you've got on, I think would translate in a finer weight yarn beautifully.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is certainly something. Yeah, we're the same too. I have to admit, we love, I mean, Southland is probably our toothiest yarn that we do. So it was, and we love it. And I think because this is the other thing I've noticed is cables. You love cables. So talk us through your love of cables. What is it about traveling stitches that just makes you sing?
I just think they're fun to do, and once you've got the pattern established, you don't have to look. You can see where they're going, and the more you do it, maybe not when you first start cables, but it's easy and it looks hard, so people are always amazed. People that don't knit anyway are always like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you made that. Well, it's not really that hard, but that's okay.
Yeah, but you don't need to tell them that, I think. Let them be amazed in the mystery of it.
I think it to myself.
Yeah. But, I know that when I've taught people how to knit, you show them that first simple cross with a braid and they're like, oh. I mean, I was like that the first time I did it. It was crazy.
Yeah, just knitting out of order. And it looks great. And I think that's why I like the toothier yarns, because the cables pop more than something a little softer that you don't see the difference in depth as much with a soft yarn.
And also too with cables as well, I find that you need to have that toothier yarn because there is extra weight in there with the yarn moving front and back with the traveling.
Yeah.
But you need to have that structure that a toothier yarn gives you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely, like this Scottish Ale sweater, it's knit front and back and it's got a drop shoulder, but this sweater is so heavy that if you did it in the round, and a couple of my testers did it in the round, but it would just grow. Yeah. It needs that structure of the seams.
Yeah. So what weight did you do that on? Was that on a worsted weight or?
This is Cascade Echo, which is really very much like the Southlander bulky.
Yeah, I was just about to say that in Southlander bulky charcoal would be incredible.
This is it's really dense with the bulky. You can do it and get gauge in worsted, and it's still going to be a warm sweater, but this sweater is hot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really I had made it for a friend of mine that was from England, and he kept saying, make me a cabled sweater. My mom used to make me sweaters, and then she would tear them out and knit a bigger size. And I mean, he was after me for probably 5 years to knit a sweater for him. And I finally did this sweater, and then I made a second one for my son. And then I made a girl's version, which I did. The girl's version is in worsted weight, and it's or like tunic length. So
that's gorgeous. So it looks like you've got a little bit of waist shaping in there.
I did. I have to cover my hips, and I knew it was going to come down over my hips, so I didn't want it to look all stretched out down there.
So what sort of gauge did you work that off? So is that sort of off an Aran weight gauge?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would look amazing because as soon as you held that up with that little bit of shaping in the tunic, it to me just looked really Celtic. Like it looked like you to sort of break out into Riverdance or something. It is just gorgeous.
I could do that.
Yeah, but that with our Kelly and Co. Would be just incredible. Now, is that in the have we got that in what's that one called?
That one is called Scottish Ale 2.
Scottish Ale 2. I'm just going to, hopefully, I think Kathy's here. Kathy, Scottish Ale 2. I've got the most wonderful lady that joins me every chat, and she's so good at dropping in the links to everything for me, so I don't have to go. I know, it's handy. It's great. Self-appointed producer. She's just wonderful. Sarah's asking, I have never made a cardigan in my life. What pattern do you think is a really good one for a beginner?
For a beginner. Well, I was going to show you, and this one is not hard. It's another cabled sweater, but this one's called Celtic Grace. I'll hold the back up. Maybe you
I love those, that double treble at the back. That's fabulous.
And it's got it on the front too.
Yeah. And are you using, is that a double moss on the sleeves?
Yes.
Yeah, love it.
I love that double moss.
Oh, same.
I use that a lot.
I did the Point Judith pullover, and that had a double moss panel in there as well. And I love it too because it's just, the texture in it is great, and it's not quite as tedious as a single moss. Yeah, it's love it.
A little bit less paying attention, but yeah. So that one's good one. I've got a lot of cardigans on Cascade that are just basic cardigans.
Yeah.
They like to have patterns like that are good for entry level knitters or just somebody who wants something straightforward and basic.
Yeah, which is, I have to admit, why once we discovered the Cascade Pattern Library here, for us, that was just such a great game changer for people, because we have, I mean, when you're an accomplished knitter and you do a lot of knitting, like I do and a lot of the staff do, you fall into habits of always knitting in the round and doing things, and you encourage people, to increase their skill set. But those Cascade patterns are so wonderful because people have to take a journey, and those Cascade patterns allow them, I think, to get something that really looks wonderful and fashionable and fits great and is beautifully designed, but it's written in a format that is more traditional, that they can understand. Yeah. And I definitely am seeing, I think, the trend, and you would have seen it for the last 10 years, there is definitely not the stigma now, I think, attached to, because for a while there it seemed it's almost like if you were wanting to knit something in pieces, it's like, oh, why would you want to do that? That's really fusty or fuddy-duddy. Whereas I think the actual benefit of that in terms of structure and construction is now starting to be appreciated.
Yes. Well, I think once you make a sweater, I feel like I'm always turning the wrong direction. Once you make a sweater and it gets stretched out, then you really do realize that those seams, though you may not want to sew them up, they do serve a purpose. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, dare I say it, Brooklyn Tweed, I think, have done, because a number of their designers like to use pieced construction, and that's always been an element for them. And I think to be able to swing people back to that has been great. And for a lot of knitters, I mean, I did the Point Judith in pieces. I hadn't done a pieced item for ages. I love the fact that you could rip through a piece and you sort of had the sense of accomplishment, and then you can pop it down and then get to the next piece. Right.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. And I also, to be fair, I don't mind seaming. I'm one of those strange people that I quite like seaming. So
yeah, I don't mind it either. And, I have some ladies that come over to my house on Tuesday nights for knit night, and I seam things for them every once in a while, just because I don't mind doing it. And I know they're going to sometimes leave it sitting for months and months. And so, but once you learn how to do it, it's just not that hard.
It's easy. Now, Donna is asking, So Donna's asking how many stones, but I think she means skeins of 8 ply would you need to make an 18 plain cardigan. So 18 as in size 18, Donna. If it were plain in an 8 ply, so you're heading into my territory now in terms of sizing, I always tend to look at around, if you are looking at a 50-gram ball in the 8 ply, it's around 100 meters per skein. So you're generally working anywhere between 16 and 1800 meters is a fairly safe place, depending on the length of your sleeves, the length of the body in the cardigan, and also too whether or not you just do plain stocking stitch or you have garter stitch. Garter stitch, if you'd have a garter stitch, I love garter stitch, actually. I'm very fond of garter stitch, but any textured stitches like garter stitch, moss stitch, double moss, any of those where the yarn is either traveling between front and back or has been worked one between front and back in full rows, will have a tendency to use anywhere between 25 and 30% more yarn than just plain stockinette stitch. So that's just something you need to be aware of. So
wow, see, I learned something, because I know cables take more, but I didn't know that garter would take more than.
So, you know, when you do that, so when you're doing one of your cabled sweaters, and I know I've had people ask me this all the time, and they'll see a cabled sweater and they go, why does this take 22 balls of yarn? And it's because you have to account for all the yarn that is moving from the front and back to your work. And that, you know, that's millimeters of yarn each time. Front and back,
and every time you do a cable, it pulls your fabric together.
And you're pulling yarn from side to side.
Get it wider.
Exactly. So with cables, you've not only got front to back, you've also got side to side. So that's why it's there. Do you have a good resource on pattern adjusting, Cheryl? What do you use anything in terms of because I know some designers use programs or have what do you do?
I just I had gotten a spreadsheet from another designer that had put it out on the internet when I first started, and that's honestly what I use most of the time. And I've got, like, the Craft Yarn Council has standards for each size, so how many inches or centimeters it is wide, and you know, bust measurements and sleeve length and all of that. So I use those figures from the Craft Yarn Council, and then I figure out what my gauge is and figure out how many stitches that I need to make that width, plus ease if it's got ease in it. Most of my sweaters have positive ease. I haven't really done anything with negative ease. I might have done that at the very beginning, but I was a little younger then and didn't mind wearing things that were a little more fitted. But most of the time, my patterns are a little more generous and have 2 to 4 inches of ease.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes we do like a little bit of latitude, don't we? Just to sort of, you know, discreetly hide those things. Also to Elizabeth as well, as I find there are sort of general books like what I've got, and I want to pick it up and show everybody, but it is literally sitting underneath my laptop holding it up. Don't you dare. I was telling Charles Gandy this the other day, and it's called The Principles of Knitting by June Hemmons Hyatt. It is a great resource, but it is an incredibly weighty, thick book, which is why it's there, because it's that plus the classic Vogue knitting collection and Nikki Epstein is what's holding up my laptop as we speak. But that is also a great book. I find sometimes if I can roughly work out the mathematics or something that I want to change. But, you know, from time to time, I've looked at something and I'm thinking, I want to do this or try this, and I can't quite remember the resource. I may have jumped on and done a quick search online, not exactly found what I want, but 9 times out of 10, I can dive into that and that book, and it will be there, and it's all written out. Now, it is a bit like a university textbook. It is a lot of writing, but June does actually break everything down into the different elements. And so if you are looking for an element for something in terms of how do I do a decrease in terms of a V-neck, or all the different ways to do a slip knit, or different cast-ons, or what have you, it is contained in there. It is like the Bible of knitting. So that's another good one to do. Now, there's a couple of things. Tabitha wants to know what's sitting on the mannequin, the sweater sitting on the mannequin behind you.
That is Aspen.
Oh, gorgeous.
So this is my first color. I've done color work, but other people's patterns, but it's my first pattern of mine that I've done color work on. And I'm just writing it out now. So it's just about ready for testers.
Ooh, oh, so there you go, Tabitha. And what sort of what white yarn is that on?
It's worsted weight yarn. It's Cascade.
Oh, lovely. Beautiful. Yeah. And Susan's saying, is that a Barbara G. Walker Stitch Dictionary on your shelf behind you?
It absolutely is. Yes. I've got lots of stitch dictionaries. And, I got some of those Japanese ones, which are really very cool, but lots of twisted stitches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Twisted stitches, lace, mixed with cables, and they get some complicated things in there.
Oh, they do.
I tend to go simple.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I've just reached over. This is one that was sitting on the. Look, you can see with the little bits of paper in it. It's already. I love ones like this because with even little motifs and blocks and things like that. And I'm always inspired by stuff like this, because I'll go through and I'll see something like that and think, how does that translate out into a bigger piece of fabric? Or it's it doesn't need to be. Yeah, doesn't need to be complicated to be effective. Yeah. No. So shawls. I know that you did do a shawl recently. Have you got the frivolity there?
I don't because I sent it.
Oh, you sent it. That's right.
I sent it to Carrie.
Yeah. So we it's a fantastic shawl. Actually, is it posted? Have you got it posted as a design up on your?
It's on Ravelry and it's also on my website.
Okay, we'll pull that up. I think it is called Intimate Frivolity, isn't it?
It is, and the yarn is Intermittent Frivolity too by You and I Yarns. So
there it is. I just loved the shawl because it is, and I'm going to pop that back into the screen here. There we go. Let's try that. There we go. It is lovely. It is all of those sorts of things. It's beautiful. There we go. I love the detailing that you have. The lace deal. You've got soft lace at the top, broken up with a bit of garter in the middle, but you've got this really gorgeous lace patterning around the border. So what sort of, when you were coming to design that, is that when you hit the stitch dictionaries and you go, right, these are the elements I want in the shawl, how do I add them?
But honestly, I thought when I got the yarn, just because it had the word intermittent, and it was speckled, I was thinking that I would do something where I would knit and garter for a while, and then if I'd come to a certain color, I'd do something, and come to another color, do something else. And it didn't work out the way that I thought it might. I wasn't happy with that. And then I switched to different sections of intermittent frivolity. So yeah, I definitely use the Stitch Dictionary for that.
Yeah. Well, I just and I love the fact that it's a really generous shawl as well. I think, it's the sort of thing that you could actually wear it, or, to keep you quite warm, but you could wrap it up and around. And So this was on
about those lightweight shawls that you can wear as a scarf and you can, as a necklace, really.
So this is You and I, which is EWE and DYE, which is yarn which is available. But if you were in this part of the world and you were wanting to substitute with that and you're wanting to get that effect of the yarn, definitely I would be looking at the Sock Bandit that we have here. That would work really fantastically well on that shawl, and the extra high twist on that plus the speckles that we have in the Sprinkles collection would look great in that yarn. So that's definitely something to consider. Or if you're splashing out and you've been watching the team at Outlaw, they've just gotten a lot of their new hedgehog fibers in, and that would also look incredible in that design. It would be fantastic. Gorgeous. What else have you got hidden? You've got anything else hidden there, Cheryl, that you can show us?
I do. I have some Christmas stockings.
Because we have to start thinking about this now. It's September.
Well, Well, I made this Christmas stocking for probably every niece and nephew that was born in my family. And, once you start, you cannot stop, because if you give one to one, got to give it to the next one too. So I thought, well, I've done all these Christmas stockings. I'm just going to make a collection.
Oh, so that looks like a tartan, a knitted tartan.
I know. And
Well,
I did
now, is that using a mosaic technique?
No, just stranded color work.
Just straight stranded color work. Wow.
But mosaic. Yeah, so that one. And then of course, I had to do a cable.
Love it.
And then this one, buffalo plaid.
I was just going to say, those are almost, that would be a lumberjack Christmas stocking.
Yeah. And then one is just a geometric pattern. And part of them, I did this heel with German short rows, and I had never done that, kind of figured out how to do that on my own, but I love that, because the ones that I did originally were all an afterthought heel. Mm-hmm. So you'd have to, put in your waste yarn and then take it out and pick up the stitches, which is it's not difficult, but I thought I'd try something else. So this one's the afterthought heel.
Yeah.
So those, I just finished the pattern writing today, and they're off to the tech editor. And
fabulous. So we can, we'll have to, you need to make sure you send me a message when those are available, because they're actually a really fun thing to do. Yeah, Michelle is on here. She said swan dry stocking. That's exactly, so the lumber one we refer to as the lumberjack stocking. There's a clothing brand down here called Swan Dry, and it's a woolen clothing, and it's sort of like felted wool.
Love it.
Yeah, heavy jackets and sort of pullover type tunics, and a lot of farmers use them because they're incredibly warm. Wool, and a lot of people in forestry here use them too. They're incredibly warm, and wool, of course, natural wool, if it gets wet, it's like wearing a sort of a scuba suit, a wet suit. Yeah. It keeps you warm. So and one of the most popular sort of coloured patterns in Swan Dries is that red and black check. So I can certainly see, if people were wanting to do Christmas stockings for family members, and in New Zealand, that red and black one would be quite popular. It would be very, very popular. Oh, that's wonderful. And what else have you got on the ball? You've just finished those. Have you got? So
I've just finished those. I've got. I just sent a raglan sweater with a cable detail on the raglans to Cascade. So I'm not sure when that'll be out. Sometimes their patterns come out shortly after I send them, and sometimes it's a year. So, it just depends on, I think, when they get the yarn. Sometimes I'll use some of their newer yarns, and they don't necessarily have it in stock at the time, especially this year.
Yeah.
At the time
so do they send you like a bundle of yarn out, and they say, this is what we've got coming in? And
they do. They'll send me, maybe 30 grams of different yarns. And sometimes they'll say, well, we've got this other worsted weight coming, but we don't have a sample of it, but it should be about the gauge of 220, and which, got tons of that. So I don't always have the actual yarn, but a lot of times I do. So that's always fun to get a package from them, because I'm usually never expecting it. I'll go, all these new yarns to try.
I know, and it's because that's just, we're a bit like them as well, in the sense that we outsource some of our milling like they do. And this year has been, we've just had a conversation before I came on air, and one of our, because we've got some stuff coming out, and because it's due to be shipped before Christmas, the quote for the shipping came, and we just were like, oh, it was bonkers, really bonkers.
I'm sure that's got to be terrible. It's just so much of that is out of your control. And
and it's the same. We had, I don't know what it was like in the US last Christmas, but Christmas here last year got affected because we import so much. And even though from a proximity perspective, a lot of stuff is made in Asia and the subcontinent. So we do get a lot of products that are made in China and Japan and India and Southeast Asia. And so it hasn't quite got as far to travel to us, but we're such a small market, New Zealand, that, you know, we're often at the end of the queue when it comes to priorities to sending things out. So it can be really tough.
Yeah, this is just kind of a funny aside story. My husband likes Diet Cherry Coke, and we would go all last year to the grocery store. They would never have it. They'd have Coke and Diet Coke, but they wouldn't have Diet Cherry. And finally, there was a rep there from Coke one day when we went into the grocery store, and he's like, well, you know, there's a shortage of aluminum right now. And the beer companies get it first, and then the soft drink companies get it. And the soft drink companies are going to do their biggest sellers first. And then every once in a while, they'll do a specialty item if they, you know, but they kind of rotate through them. So I'm like, you know, that's just so interesting. We thought maybe they were discontinuing it or.
No. I mean, I know for us, just so, for example, one of the things that we're really struggling with this year is getting dye for our dye house. So we have been told that there's an international shortage on certain components and ingredients that are essential in creating certain colors of dye, so particularly around blues and reds. So, you know, when that happens, and I mean, you've got to, like, we buy dyes in large boxes and drums. Yeah. So it's, you know, that you throw that sort of little component into the mix, or we have so the thread sometimes that we use on our wrap yarns, you know, we've had to wait for that, or the superwash fiber, because the superwash fiber, even though it may be sometimes fiber from New Zealand or Australia, the superwash process doesn't happen in this part of the world. It all happens it all happens offshore. So there's sort of a big hub of it that happens predominantly in Turkey and in Italy and Turkey and or India or China. So those are the sort of four main countries that do it. And so we'll always default to India or China because from a shipping perspective, they're much quicker to get to us than Europe, which takes much, much longer. And it's, and the minute you get a shortage on something like that and you start scrambling to try and find somewhere else, like if we have to go Europe, well, then you double the length of time for shipping to get it to you, and
and cost.
It's a challenge. Yeah, it is a real challenge. Yeah. Oh, well, look, it has been an absolute joy to talk to you. I'm so glad that we've been able to do this. It's been heaps of fun, and it just gives people, particularly our knitters down here, an opportunity to see what is actually out there beyond what we can access locally. And that also, even in these crazy times, we've still got the ability to be able to reach out and try so many different things. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. And thank you to everybody. See, today, a lot of people, I'm really amazed at how many have still come along and joined, because so many of us have actually gone back to work today. And the wonderful Kathy that drops in my links, bless her heart, she's actually back at work sneakily listening and dropping the links in at the same time. So Kathy, you're a superstar. Thank you so much for that. And Michelle, I see you're here, just to let you know your parcel arrived with all of those flowers in it this morning for Barbara. So thank you so much for that. All right. Thank you to Cheryl. This has been wonderful. Just a reminder, the store reopens again on Monday. We will only be opening Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. during level 2.5. But once we get back to level 1, everything will go back to normal. Fear not. And also, I will be back here again with the Skeinz Diaries on Monday as well. So until then, have a great weekend knitting, and I will catch up with you all then. Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you to everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.